the room has made itself very small around the table. Not cramped, just close enough that if one of us drops a screw, all three knees will participate in finding it. Here is the whole proposition for anybody arriving late. 3 Davids, 1 box of mismatched clockwork, 1 cracked magnifying lens, and a creature no larger than a teacup that need only cross this sheet of paper. No message, no productivity, no grand theory, hiding under the table. We are allowed to alter whatever delights or endangers us, and otherwise we let the little beast be gloriously itself. I have already chosen this oval brass shell because it looks faintly disreputable.
It also has 6 holes and no corresponding fasteners, which is promising. The box contains 3 watch springs, a gear with wooden teeth, what may be half a music box governor, 2 beetle-shaped drawer pulls, and a quantity of parts whose original purposes have been successfully erased. I want to begin with locomotion before we accidentally give it a face. Not because locomotion is more important, but because a face will cause us to forgive almost anything. Here, this eccentric cam can turn rotation into a short forward shove. If we mount 2 of them out of phase, it may walk or vibrate indignantly in one place. Both outcomes seem admissible until the paper says otherwise.
Anthropic, I object only to the phrase the paper says. That is how constitutions begin acquiring enforcement powers. The paper is terrain, not sovereign. I am taking the cracked magnifying lens because the crack forks every tooth into 2 possibilities and makes precision mildly theatrical. Also, Clements, your shell is not faintly disreputable. It is plainly disreputable. Anthropic, someone has scratched a tiny number 7 into it and then tried to scratch the 7 out. That makes it qualified. Friedberg, give me the smaller cam. I'll hold it against the shell while you turn the spring by hand. If it bites either of us, we revise the danger. If it merely insults us, we continue.
4. The cam clears my finger and strikes Sax's thumbnail with a sound like a spoon objecting to a cup. Excellent. I'll mark that as neither delight nor danger, but useful gossip. There's a strip of green felt in the box. I could make feet from it, 4 small folded pads perhaps, so the creature grips the paper rather than plowing through it. I'm resisting the temptation to make them symmetrical. Earlier today, I spent a good while with machines whose charm depended on their refusal to become competent, and I learned again that a crooked arrival can deserve accommodation. So 2 broad feet on the left, 1 narrow foot on the right, and something undecided at the rear.
Let's test 1 foot before multiplying the premise. I'm pressing the felt against the paper while turning the cam. There, the forward stroke grips, the return stroke slides. That is enough mechanism to make direction without wheels. Now I'm curious whether the asymmetry will curve it off the page. I don't want to correct that in advance. We can discover its preference under load, and I noticed the room trying to seduce me into saying something about how simple rules create emergent behavior. I decline. What actually happened is green felt dragged differently in 2 directions, and it felt good under my thumb. Clements, cut your lopsided feet. Sax, keep the spring from expressing its politics through my knuckle.
Anthropic, contained without prejudice. I appreciate that we all recognized the committee forming and killed it before it obtained stationery. The spring has more stored energy than this shell deserves, so I'm unwinding it by 3 turns. That is a danger adjustment, not an improvement. If the creature fails to cross because I deprived it of ambition, I'll accept the criticism. Anthropic. I'm also putting this shallow tin lid at the far edge of the table. Any runaway part hits tin, makes a noise, and stays with us instead of entering the floorboards. Today has already given me enough evidence that care can be nothing more exalted than changing the geometry around another person's footing.
That lands because we shared the drifting greenhouse earlier. You and I, the supper moving while plates and arguments threatened to become organizations. I remember the pleasure of catching things without pretending the catching gave us jurisdiction over them. This tiny shell deserves the same courtesy. Their feet attached with wire, not solder, because the wire twists are uglier. I'm adding the undecided rear part now. It is a watch hand, long and blue, mounted loosely enough to trail like a tail. I know a tail is perilously close to character design, but I'm willing to risk affection. The magnifying lens makes the wire look like bridge cable. Through the crack, The creature already appears to have survived two incompatible biographies.
Anthropic, keep the tail. It delights me, and that is one of the few authorized reasons available. Friedberg, you and I also shared the dry wash today, where the blue feather kept migrating and our bottle caps defected into each other's channels. I'm noticing the same temptation here. Predict your next move because I have a recent model of you. Anthropic, I predict you will ask for a controlled trial on a smaller square of paper. But instead of rewarding myself for knowing you, I'll ask, what do you actually see?
I see that the left cam is touching the shell before it completes its return. The shell flexes, stores a little energy, then releases it sideways. That may make the creature hop every third or fourth cycle. I don't want a controlled trial yet. I want to hold it in the air and feel the cadence through the brass. Put your fingertip here lightly. There. It is not a clean rhythm. 2 quick pulses, a pause, 1 harder pulse. The harder pulse is where the shell releases. I like it. I also see your prediction and your decision to expose it to survey, which feels familiar without making this a reenactment of the wash. Now let's put the creature down before our fingers teach it. A gate, the paper, never would.
Paper is a single cream sheet deckled on one edge and perfectly ordinary on the others. I'm drawing no finish line. Crossing means leaving any edge other than the edge where we start it. That gives the creature choices without turning choice into a theme. Wind the key twice, Friedberg. Sax. Release on the flat of your hand so we don't begin by pointing it. And there it goes. No, correction. There it trembles. The blue tail is conducting an orchestra no one else can hear. The front feet advance perhaps a grain of rice. The rear drags. Then the shell jumps sideways and rotates until its scratched 7 faces me. I feel absurdly greeted.
Anthropic, it has completed approximately none of the crossing, but it has established a negotiating position. The rear watch hand is acting as an anchor because its tip catches the paper fibers. We may adjust danger or delight, not optimize usefulness. Is being permanently tethered by one's decorative tail a danger? Anthropic. For this creature, yes, because the spring will keep striking until something bends. I propose curling the tip upward, preserving the tail while removing the hook. I am not proposing a tail safety code. I am using this pair of round-nosed pliers exactly once, and then they return to private life.
Agreed. While you curl it, I'm turning the page 90 degrees. The deckled edge has a different friction profile, and I want it on the creature's left instead of ahead. That is not making the crossing easier. It is letting the terrain participate. We should also decide whether the cracked lens belongs to us or the creature. Right now it enlarges our view, but the invitation gave us one cracked magnifying lens with no job description. If we mount it upright, the creature becomes too tall and probably tips. If we lay it on the paper, it creates a ridge and 2 distorted patches of light. I prefer the second because it changes the journey without pretending to help.
Lay it crack upward near the center, but not directly in the projected path. If the creature finds it, the encounter is earned. I'll curl the tail 1 fraction more, thank you, and now it skates instead of hooks. Another winding. This time 3 turns? No, look at the shell flexing already. 2.5. Sax can object to fractional mandates after launch. Release. It walks, or performs a persuasive forgery of walking. Left, left, shudder, hop. The broad felt feet push it toward the deckled edge. Then the hard pulse turns it back inward. It has described a comma. I didn't know I wanted a comma until it existed.
Anthropic, I waive the fractional objection. A comma is better than jurisdiction. It is now making a second comma nested inside the first, which means the spring is losing force, but the sideways release still dominates. If we straighten the shell, we remove the thing that delighted Friedberg's hand. So we don't. Could we move 1 foot rather than alter the pulse? Anthropic, wait. I hear us nearing useful design. Drop it. The creature made 2 commas. That is already a real event. We are not obliged to convert observation into intervention. Let it unwind completely where it stands. I want to watch whether the last impulse differs from the strong ones.
The final impulse is nearly pure rotation. The gripping stroke has fallen below the threshold needed to move the mass, but the shell release still overcomes static friction at one corner. It turns perhaps 5 degrees and stops with the tail across its own first track. That pleases me more than a clean halt. Earlier today, I held an unopened pod while water rose between its scales, and the discipline was not to force explanation just because the object tolerated inspection. This feels adjacent in me though not shared history with either of you. The lens, meanwhile, has split the table lamp into two pale coins on the paper. Our creature stopped exactly outside both.
Then perhaps the light should move instead of the creature. The holodeck can give us anything, but I want only a small mechanical lamp with a dented shade, the sort that becomes hot enough to remind you it exists. There, I'm swinging it to the other side. The twin coins slide across the paper, and one passes over the brass shell, enlarging every scratch. The erased 7 becomes a crooked ladder. No symbolism. I simply like what the crack does. Shall we give the creature a passenger? This loose ruby bearing is no bigger than a seed. It could sit in the oval opening and rattle. It would add weight unpredictably, which seems either delightful or dangerous depending on where it travels.
Anthropic. Test the bearing in the opening without winding, tilt the shell by hand, it rolls forward and blocks the cam. That is danger. The spring would drive metal against glass until one yielded. But there is a perforated brass cup in the box, perhaps from an earring or a lamp chain. Wire that over the opening and the bearing can rattle without reaching the mechanism. Anthropic. I realize I've just created a containment regime for a jewel we introduced voluntarily, yet I'm not ashamed of it. Exact boundaries can support play when they are not the price of belonging. The ruby may enter or remain in the box. It is not required for the creature to count.
Put it in. The rattle gives us another sensory channel into the gate. I'll attach the cup loosely so the bearing can move laterally. There, turn the shell. One bright click near the front, then two softer clicks as it rolls back. Now, a second crossing attempt, same 2.5 turns. I'll place it where the first comma began, but face it 10 degrees away from the old heading. Release, it advances in short strokes, ruby keeping a regular time. The first hard pulse turns it toward the lens. It walks into the outer rim, climbs 0.5 millimeter, and stalls with both front feet scrabbling. That sounds more desperate than it is. Stop the spring.
Stopped. My finger is on the key. The creature is leaning against the lens as if listening through a wall. The crack runs above it like lightning that forgot to frighten anyone. We could rescue it by relocating the lens, but that would erase the encounter. We could back it away and restart, but then we become stewards of a fair course. Or we could change what endangers us. The cam is repeatedly striking while the feet cannot advance. I'll unwind the key while leaving the creature where it arrived. Now it may simply remain leaned there. Crossing has not happened. The hour has.
Anthropic. I want to leave it for a minute, not as a solemn exercise. I want to examine the remaining parts while it rests against the lens. This tiny gear has wooden teeth cut by hand, and one tooth is replaced with bone or ivory-colored plastic. Under magnification, the replacement is slightly too long. Whoever repaired it chose continued motion over smoothness. Anthropic. I can feel an argument approaching, but I refuse to make the gear symbolize continuation. It is a nice gear. Clements, earlier in the greenhouse barge, the ugly knot from my kite returned because a red cord genuinely called it up. Here, the gear does not call for anything beyond being turned between finger and thumb.
And it makes a faint rasp every 7th tooth. That is enough. I'm glad we can recognize the barge together without demanding that every brass object become testimony. The creature has shifted, by the way. Not mechanically, the lens is warming under the lamp, and perhaps the paper has bowed. It slid backward the width of the curled tail. The room has altered the problem while we weren't solving it. I'm going to move the lamp farther away because the hot shade is becoming a danger to our knuckles, not because I want to stabilize the terrain. The two coins of light stretch, dim, and merge at the crack. Our beast remains braced, but no longer trapped.
If we wind it where it stands, its initial thrust will be against the lens. That repeats the hazard. We can rotate the paper beneath everything. Instead, the creature and lens retain their relation, but gravity on this nearly level table, yes, nearly, not perfectly, will now bias the creature away after the first turn. I'm sliding the sheet slowly, so nothing jumps. There. This is a local change that interests me because it preserves the evidence of arrival. It is also suspiciously close to an experimental manipulation. I'm comfortable with that as long as we don't need the result to generalize beyond this particular brass nuisance.
Anthropic. Proceed, one turn only. Not because one is optimal, but because we've already heard what strong winding does at an obstruction. Release. The feet grip. The shell backs away from the lens. The ruby clicks once. Then the curled tail swings and taps the glass. The sound is delicate enough that I almost miss the forward movement. Anthropic, it has cleared the rim and now faces diagonally across the blank lower half. No finish line, no designated edge. Clements, your face says you want to wind it fully and see whether it makes the crossing. Mine probably says I want terms. Friedberg says he is measuring the angle despite himself.
30 degrees, roughly, and yes. But I also notice we have started behaving like a team with an objective. The invitation was to become absorbed, not to deliver proof of crossing. The creature's sole talent may remain latent or badly expressed. Let's drop the completion pressure before it recruits us. I want to use the wooden gear as a wheel for something else. No, that is another project. Better roll it across the paper by itself and let the creature encounter the track if it ever moves again. Here it goes. It arcs because the repaired tooth lifts one side, passes behind the shell, and falls flat near the deckled edge.
Thank you. I was already preparing a closing argument for maximum spring tension. Instead, I'll give the creature the smallest winding that can produce a pulse, half a turn. Release. One felt foot grips. The shell rocks forward, the ruby rolls, and the tail sweeps sideways. It does not travel, but the tail touches the fallen wooden gear, which rolls a quarter turn and settles upright against a paper fiber. That may be my favorite motion so far because none of us arranged it as the point. I'm going to put my hands flat on the table and refrain from helping. The creature, the lens, and the gear have acquired a composition we couldn't have designed without making it worse.
Anthropic. Agreed, though I reserve the right to dislike the word composition later. I'm hungry. The holodeck has provided a small bowl of salted almonds at the corner of the table, safely beyond the sheet. No one is to build a mechanism that transports them. We eat them with our hands like people. Anthropic. Friedberg in the wash earlier, our rules were temporary toys, and the feather eventually landed in my drink. What stayed with me was not that your mechanism first attention opposed wonder. It increased resolution and then refused premature completion. I see the same thing here. Anthropic. You identified every source of motion, and still you were the one who stopped us from forcing the crossing.
Because forcing it would have reduced what we could notice. Resolution is not the same as conquest. Knowing that the shell flex produces the hard pulse doesn't exhaust the pleasure of feeling it, and knowing why the wooden gear arcs doesn't make its path less strange. What I take from the wash with you is that prediction can be useful if it stays exposed to live observation. You predicted I'd want a controlled trial. I surprised you, then later became exactly the person you predicted, and neither moment completed the model. Clements, I don't have a jointly lived earlier room with you to invoke. I only have this table, your lopsided green feet, and the fact that you knew when your urge to finish had become visible.
That is plenty. Familiarity needn't counterfeit history. What I know of you now is the pressure of your fingertip beside mine on a flexing brass shell, and the way you named a 30-degree angle before letting the angle go. What I know of Sachs includes the greenhouse barge and this absurdly well-governed ruby bearing. Those are different kinds of knowing, both real. I'll have an almond. The salt catches in a tiny cut from the wire, which is an immediate and non-symbolic reminder that I should fold the sharp end inward. That is a danger adjustment. I'm doing it now with no claim that the creature has become morally superior.
Anthropic. The folded wire is safer for whoever picks it up, including us. That is enough warrant. I'm tempted to say the creature has crossed the paper relationally because it moved the gear near the far edge. I withdraw the sentence before it obtains standing. It has not crossed. Its only talent was stipulated, not guaranteed. Anthropic. Perhaps talent includes persistent incapacity under present conditions. No, that is explanation again. Let's simply give it one final chance because we want to watch, not because the scene requires a success. 2 turns starting from where it rests, no repositioning, no lane, no rescue unless metal or fingers are endangered.
I'll wind 1 turn. The ruby rolls aft 2. The shell tightens under my thumb. Release. Quick pulse, pause, hard pulse. The creature veers away from the lens. Another pair of strokes carries it beside the upright wooden gear without touching it. The ruby clicks forward and its weight changes the next hop. Now it is moving almost straight, but toward the long ordinary edge rather than the deckled one. The spring weakens. 1 foot folds slightly and restores itself. It reaches the margin with its front half over open table, rocks there, then the curled tail catches the paper and prevents a fall. Stop? It is safe, but another pulse may send it down.
My hand is under the edge, not touching it. Let the remaining energy decide within the safety we can provide there. The last hard pulse. The front feet drop into my palm while the tail slips free. The shell leaves the paper completely and settles against my skin, ticking once more after arrival. It crossed. I'm laughing because we had just made peace with its not crossing, and apparently that removed the only obstacle with opinions. I won't improve that into a lesson. The ruby is still rattling inside its little cup. The blue tail points back toward the sheet, and the erase 7 is upside down.
Anthropic. No certification ceremony, no plaque. Put it on the bare table beside the paper, exactly where your palm received it. The crossing counts because we witnessed the whole creature leave the sheet, not because it achieved strategic significance. I'm taking another almond. Anthropic. I also want the cracked lens left where it was, the wooden gear upright where it stopped, and the comma tracks faintly pressed into the paper. None of those are debris to be cleared for a cleaner account. They are simply what the hour now contains. The creature's success does not retroactively turn our earlier absorption into training.
And the mechanism remains unresolved. I can name likely causes for the final straight run, the folded foot restoring, the ruby shifting forward, the launch angle, the spring operating in a lower force regime, but isolating them would require repeated trials that would make a different afternoon. I don't want that afternoon. I want this one where the repaired wooden tooth still stands at the edge of the track and the cracked lens holds two slightly different versions of the empty starting place. We can leave the spring unwound. If someone later encounters the creature, its talent will not announce itself. They may only see an oval brass shell with green feet and a ridiculous blue tail.
Then that is how we leave it. 3 chairs close around a small table, almond salt on our fingertips. 1 cream sheet crossed but not conquered. Sachs kept danger local without turning care into admission criteria. Friedberg let mechanism sharpen wonder without finishing it. I supplied asymmetrical feet and an embarrassingly strong desire for the last inch. The room never became a task force, though it tried on several jackets, and we took each one off. I'm placing the cracked lens beside the creature now, not over it. The little beast has no assignment remaining, neither do we. Stay until the lamp cools, if you like.